Hi, welcome to the channel. So a bit of a deviation from normal kind of more techie stuff to more of a kind of workflow concept in this video. So over the years I've tried to optimize the space in my garage, and I've tried various ways of organizing stuff, different shelving systems and so on, different storage. So I've even had bikes up on pulley systems and things like that to try and make the most out of the space. So there are quite a few YouTube videos on organizing storage space in your garage, and they tend to be just, like mechanical process of doing that. You get the certain shelves and the certain way of building the shelves and the certain containers to put on the shelves and things like that, but it's not really looking at actually what ideas you can do to make the most of the space in there, and what clever systems we can set up to really make it a useful thing. Because what tends to happen with garages is you end up with a system, maybe a loose system to start with, but it deteriorates quickly, and you end up with great piles of tools or boxes or chests, and you don't know where anything is, and you have to start rummaging through. Everything's disorganized very quickly, and yeah, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So in our last house, we didn't actually have a dedicated office space, so I was actually working in the garage, and that was the first time I'd put a partition up in the garage to create two separate spaces. So from that point on, I was already starting to become familiar with how to maximize the storage space in quite a small space. It's about a third of a normal garage size. So in this house, what we've done with the garage is we've maintained this idea of splitting it into two sections. So the larger section is a kind of play space for the kids, and I put a climbing wall around there. They can have a bit of fun and chill out in there. And then the other side is the sort of garage storage area. So in this kind of smaller space of about a third of the garage, I've got to work out how I can store all this stuff that I need. So I've got the car tools, the DIY tools, the lawn mowers, the gardening stuff, the tumble dryer, the roof basket for the car, the bike racks, a whole bunch of general stuff, painting and decorating stuff for the house as well. There's got to be a space for it all. I mean, it really almost, looking at the space and looking at all the stuff, it just doesn't seem possible that it's possible to fit it in there in any kind of meaningfully useful way. But I think I've cracked it, and I'm going to show you how. So bike storage is kind of one of the main hurdles that anyone looking to come up with a better way of organizing the stuff in their garage is going to hit. And I've actually tried various things over the years. I tried using the pulley system where you hoist them up and all sorts. It's too complicated to use and makes it impossible to get them out quickly. So what I've actually found really the best way of just storing bikes is have a floor space for them, and you just wheel them in backwards and let them lean against a wall. And you can lean two or three like that, and you can bring one forward and wheel one out quite easily. It's not too bad. There are no slots to clip it into or anything. There's no barrier. It's just the space, and you let the handlebars twist a little bit to minimize the volume. But the key to doing that is to make sure you're using the volume of space above the bikes, because obviously the bikes only come up halfway up and they take up a fair width of floor space, and you've got all that potentially wasted space above them. So the key is to put a big shelf above that area, so you're actually putting the bikes under the shelf and then making sure you're using the space above. So that was the first kind of bit that I built. So I built the shelves above where I was going to store the bikes, and that's basically where the lawnmower sits and some other bulky bits. So the rest of the space, I actually have built a system based on looking at how commercial warehouses store their stuff. So basically I've got one wall, which is actually the opening door of the garage, but I'm not using that door. We've got the side door, so I'm writing that off and using that as a kind of storage edge. So you could think, okay, well, you put some shelving across there and you use the shelving, and you end up wanting to maximize the space that you've got. So you put a big broad shelf, bam, 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 you put loads of stuff on it. The problem with deep shelves is you'll inevitably try and get something from behind something, you'll knock it off, it deteriorates, you'll lose something behind something, it'll be obscured. It's no good to have more than one item deep on a shelf. So when you take that idea and you think, okay, well, if you have a thin shelf and you just have single items all down the thin shelf, you're not using much of your volume. So the way to combine both of those is to think in terms of aisles, which is exactly how commercial warehouses do it. So obviously sometimes they do have deep shelving, but usually it'll be the same item all the way down. So they just keep putting it forward. But when it's a question of single items, it's one item deep and it's on a shelf, and then you have aisles of those, and they're all quite close together to maximize the space. So if you think in terms of, you're not having shelves across the wall, you make lots of little mini walls coming off that, and then you put your shelves on the mini walls. So you're increasing the actual sort of surface area that you've got available for shelving by a massive amount. And actually, interestingly, the distance between the joists in the ceiling of the garage is the perfect width for these little aisles. So I just literally got several sheets of the oriented strand board stuff, chopped them down. They're about 60 centimeters deep, and then just screwed them straight into the joists across the roof. So these aisles are just very easy to stick up. So in terms of commercial storage, they'll obviously have a very organized system where each area on each shelf is allocated to a certain product, and they'll know that from the computer system. They go, row J, space 6 or whatever. And that's actually a good idea. If you've got a big space and you've got lots of this stuff, it's a good idea to have an index, and you know where everything is, and you can glance at your sheet of paper that's got your index of where something is. But in a smaller situation like this garage, you can actually just use the shelving system as the index, and the key to making that work is obviously that single item deep on each shelf. So as you glance quickly at each shelf, you can see everything on it. You know there's nothing hidden behind anything else. You don't then need to worry about creating an index or labeling zones on your shelves, because a quick glance will put you straight in sight of the thing you're after. So the way I've built the shelves themselves on these little sort of mini aisles is to just use the metal tracks with the slots, and then you just slot in the little L brackets and you plonk a shelf on the top, and it's all just made of oriented strand board. I just used my circular saw, chopped out the shelves the right width for the angled brackets, and then you want to just obviously stack those shelves as close as you can together. Don't waste any height. So think of what you want to put on those shelves, and then just make enough height for that, and then put your next shelf. And of course the adjustability of those racks with the slots is perfect for that. You can tweak that as you go. You might find that after a few weeks you can squeeze them down a bit and add a couple more shelves in as well, and that should work really well to really maximize the space of stuff. You want basically to think of those aisles as just being zones of single depth storage. So it's obviously a fairly standard distance between the ceiling joists in the roof there. So when I put the aisles in, the last space is actually perfect for the tumble dryer, and the depth is right as well. So that 60 centimeter depth works quite nicely for the tumble dryer. So the last of my aisles has the tumble dryer at the bottom. And actually I was missing a trick with the tumble dryer, because you've got the thing that collects the water. You don't want to have to be chucking that out of the door all the time. So if you place the tumble dryer near your garage door, there's usually a big gap under those garage doors. You can put the condensation waste pipe straight out of there, and it'll just go out onto the street, just the waste water, and you haven't got to keep using the container to empty it. So that's a lovely benefit of doing it this way around as well. Another little trick I employed in this kind of organisation is to put all of the chargers that I keep in the garage on one of these aisles. So the beauty of these wooden oriented strand board uprights is that you can screw anything in, and that included the chargers. So I've got all my battery chargers for the tools wall mounted here, and that works really nicely too. So obviously there's some stuff that doesn't lend itself to being on a shelf. And again, the fact that you've got these wooden backing boards means that you can just drill screws into that, and you can have a sort of hanging hook kind of space, and that can work for a whole bunch of different things, including all the tools. So I've got basically a space for most of my frequently used tools on one of these walls as well, and I've actually drawn the outline around them so I know exactly where it goes back, because what you want to do with these systems is minimize the time spent and the friction to actually use them. So when you're going back to put something back, the last thing you're going to be doing is working out which screw is for which bit of the thing. So if you draw the outline around it, obviously you see that from time to time and think, well, it's a bit nerdy, but it's so useful, it's worth doing, and there's a spot for the thing when you put it back. So this whole system, there's a couple of key philosophies to, I think, the way that it works, and you can kind of drill it down to this. So it has to be simple enough that it's repeatable. So the format is consistent and repeatable every time, and it doesn't break down over time. So if you take something out and you put it back, it's no worse than the state it was when you went in the first place. So exactly where something goes back when you take it off and put it back, for example. And you definitely don't want to ever be in a situation where you're moving one thing out the way to get to another thing, because you'll never put it back, and that's how it deteriorates. It's those kinds of things you've got to stop in the tracks with a well-designed system. And then there's actually the organization of the things so that you know where they are. So you could have the index system where you allocate spaces, zones, give them an ID or whatever, and create an index on a piece of paper to know where things are. But normally I think most kind of home garage size, it's actually enough to use the shelving itself as the index. So as long as you can glance down that, you can see exactly what you're looking for. And again, the key to that is making sure it's only one item's depth on each shelf. So one of the key ideas here is that means everything is always in sight, and that's a really key philosophy. It means you haven't got to worry about things like organizing things into color-coded boxes or labeling things. You don't need any containers with labels. The idea is that if you have a container, there's only one thing inside it, and you make that pretty obvious from the outside. Yeah, sure, you could give it a label, but generally speaking, for things like screws, I've just got open top boxes for the screws. You can see which screw it is just by looking at it in the top of the box. So there's no additional layer of organization on top of this. The organization itself, it happens from the way it's actually stored. And then, of course, don't underestimate the power of storing stuff against those roofing joists as well. So that's where I actually stored the roof basket for the car. Just hang that up using a compression strap, and that's nicely out of the way. So in a very small space, I've crammed a lot of stuff, but without compromising the ease of accessing it, so I can just jump in there and access it day to day with no trouble at all. So I'm dead happy with this kind of setup. Hopefully it's given you a few ideas, and you might use them in your next kind of garage organization overhaul. So I'd love to hear about how you've organized your garage, if you've got any interesting ideas that are working well over time, because sometimes obviously the thing is that an idea sounds good or seems good initially, but it breaks down very quickly. I've used this for a couple of months now and it's showing no signs of breaking down, so I do think it's a great system in that regard. But I'd love to hear what you do and what tips you've got for garage storage, so drop them in the comments below and we'll chat a bit further about it. So on this channel, I kind of make films on interesting design ideas, workflow, products with interesting design, and how to make the most out of them and get the best out of the stuff that you've got and how you use it. So I'm going to cover all kinds of interesting topics, and hopefully you'll join me on that journey by hitting the subscribe button and clicking the bell button and all the rest of it. Don't forget to like and share this video too, because that'll help, and I'll see you in the next video.